As a professional producer and songwriter, there's a few things that I find myself doing in Ableton over and over again that I think every producer out there should know. And that means you. I've used these tips to make music with over 100 million streams and tour the world. And I don't say this to brag, but more to inspire you and let you know that these tips really work. You just have to take some time to implement them into your own creative process. These tips range from beginner all the way through advanced, so be sure and watch all of them so you don't miss out, because even just one of them could be exactly what you need right now. This is some really powerful stuff if you apply it. So that being said, let's get started. Tip number 1 is comp your vocals. And this has been an absolute lifesaver for me to get my vocals sounding as good as possible and making me sound way better at singing than I really am. Ableton was lagging in vocal comping for a while, but Ableton 11 finally introduced it, which means you can record over and over and it'll save everything you record in these nice and organized take lanes. In order to utilize this tool properly, you just press Option Command U. Now here you can see all these different takes that I did. If I were to record a new take, it would make a new take lane for this take. Now I've recorded a ton of vocal takes for this song, but it's gonna move that new take all the way down to the last take lane down here at the bottom. So every time you record, it generates a new take lane, and you can listen to each take that you did by clicking on these little speaker icons right here. So I can listen to this take.
Can you picture this?
Then I can click on the next speaker icon, listen to the next take below it.
Can you picture this?
And then let's say I really liked this take. All I have to do is highlight it and press enter, and it moves that take up here to the top on the main vocal track. Then I want to make sure to unsolo it so I can hear the main vocal track again. So you can see what I've done here is I've taken the best version of each word or each phrase and put together the ultimate vocal take. Some people call it Frankensteining a vocal because you're taking all these different parts and assembling them into one. Now when you're editing vocals, also make sure to utilize the fades, which are just on the upper corners of these clips, and you can drag them like this to smooth out the transition between clips. You can also grab a fade and drag it over the other clip, and that will crossfade between clips, and you can use this little thing in the middle to adjust the crossfade volume. You can also use Command E to split a clip and then control the volume of that clip down here where it says gain. This is a great way to cut your breaths out or just separate them from the main vocal and turn them down a bit so your breaths aren't super loud in your vocal take. Hopefully that makes sense. Some other bonus tips for recording vocals is to record at a 1 shaka distance from the mic, basically just 6 to 8 inches away from the microphone, and then treat recording vocals like sports.
Treat them like sports? Ethan, what the heck does that mean?
All that means is to A, make sure you're hydrated, B, warm up before you record, and C, practice the vocal part in advance. These tips will make a night and day difference, trust me. Michael Jackson would practice his songs hundreds of times before he stepped into the studio to record. And when it came time, he could knock the whole song out in just a couple takes. Practice makes a big difference. And side note, I don't want to hear any comments about how I'm wearing a beanie and headphones over the beanie. I'm having a bad hair day. The beanie is to cover my hair. I do not mix music with a beanie on. But I gotta say, this Viore beanie is not bad, huh? My next tip got me from being an intermediate producer all the way to advanced and professional. And the tip is to A/B your song with another similar song made by professionals. Another way of saying this is to use references. Now, don't write me off yet. Seriously, this can save you years of learning time and trying to figure out how to improve on your own. See, if you were to hold up a piece of art that you did next to something super professional, something super well done, you could spot a lot of the differences between your art and what you wish your art looked like. And in the same way, we can do this in Ableton with our song and someone else's song. Even after a decade of producing and mixing, I still have so many blind spots. Especially after hearing something over and over and over, your ears get desensitized, and this method helps show me where I'm going wrong. I would venture to say that every song in the top 100 on Spotify, Apple Music, or Billboard was worked on by a professional producer, mixed by a professional mixing engineer, and mastered by a pro as well. So when I hold up my song next to something like that, and I hear the best production, the best mixing, and the best mastering, I'm able to figure out what I can do to improve through spotting the differences between my song and the reference. And the more you do this, the better you're gonna get at not only selecting good references to compare your song to, but you're also gonna get way better at hearing the differences between the reference and your song and making the changes to improve. Let's jump into Ableton real quick so I can show you how to do this, just so you don't make any silly mistakes like I've done. So once you're in your project, all you're gonna wanna do is just create a new track up top, Command T, I've already done that, and you're gonna drag in your reference track. Okay, great. That's all, right? Not quite. If we just did that, then the reference would be going through our mastering chain, which we don't want. So we want to make sure to select external output. Now right here to the right where it says master, you're just going to click on that and click external out. This will make it so that this track isn't sending all the way down here to the master and going through all the processing on your master chain, which if you watched my other video on Ableton should just be a limiter and nothing more. But you can check out that video if you want to get more details on what I do to master. All right, so after we've selected external output, we can just turn this track off by clicking on the number and then use solo when we want to listen to the reference, and then click on solo again to listen to our regular track, and we can go back and forth and make adjustments to our track as necessary. This is literally the exact method that I use to get my mixes from good to great. I get super good feedback from clients and also people who just listen to my music in general. This is simple, but it's powerful. Using references is a must in my opinion. Moving right along, my next tip is actually for your studio setup. Now, this isn't specific to Ableton, but it's just really helpful to know either way, and everyone should know this. So tip number 3 is to make a triangle.
What is this, some kind of kindergarten toy? Make a triangle?
Yes, you want to make an equilateral triangle with your speakers and your head. So if you don't know how far apart to put the speakers and how far away to sit from the speakers, the goal is for there to be the same distance between one speaker and the other speaker, and then the speaker and your head and your head and the speaker. An equilateral triangle. Also, you want to make sure you can't see either side of the speaker, meaning the speakers are facing you head on. You also want to have your speakers at the same height as your head. Some of this seems like common knowledge, but you would be surprised. This is super helpful for making sure you're getting accurate sound from your speakers. I mean, the whole idea with studio monitors is that they're so flat and they're so clear that if something sounds great on those, it'll sound good on every other speaker that you play it through. So that's why it's so important to have them set up properly. Tip number 4 is to subscribe for more tips. No, this isn't actually one of the tips, but I've been working really hard to teach you guys stuff that's genuinely helpful and applicable, and it truly would mean a ton to me if you would consider subscribing and giving me the chance to keep teaching you every single week. Also, giving that like button a little spanking just to let YouTube know that this video is actually helpful for producers who are trying to improve. It's free for you, and it makes a really big difference for me. All right, enough of that. Let's get on to the actual tip number 4, which is to automate your master volume to make your choruses or hooks absolutely massive. This tip is especially helpful for electronic music, but it can be used with every genre. I must warn you though, that with great power comes great responsibility. Thanks, Uncle Ben. But for real, this one is pretty easy to overdo, but if you get it just right, it can make a world of difference for the way that your song hits. When people say, this song hits different, a lot of times this is likely part of the reason why that song is a total banger. So let me show you how I personally use this method and how to make sure you get the balance between no dynamics at all and blowing someone's face off. Okay, so I have a side project called John Balaya, and I have this song I released called Nicotine that's just crushing it right now on Spotify. It's getting like between 6,000 and 10,000 plays a day. Yesterday it randomly got like 16,000 plays. It's crazy, the power of the Spotify algorithm. But in this song, there's a drop. So there's a little build-up section that goes like this.
Stay off of that alcohol, that nicotine. You'll get that body like a magazine. Just one more thing, stay off of the weed. You'll finally know what it's like to be free.
There's this big open break, and then the drop.
Stay off of that alcohol, that nicotine. You'll get that body like a magazine.
And there's something about the drop that hits extra hard, and it's in the automation on the master channel. So let's go ahead and open up my master channel, which it looks like all I did was add a little bit of EQ on it. It's called Air. This is from Slate Digital. Normally I never add anything except for just a limiter on the master channel. So what I normally do is try to mix everything as loud as I possibly can and keep the gain at 0. And then what I'll do is I'll go into audio effects, I'll go into utilities, and I'll drag a utility onto the master channel, and I'll just turn the gain down 1 dB like that, or maybe 1.5 dB. You can hold shift to go in 0.1 decibel increments, and then I'll automate this to turn on and off. So the chorus of the song or the drop hits right here, and what I would do is I would click up here on this line to turn automation on, and now you can see this red line on the master channel. So this utility right here is turning the whole song down by 1.5 dB. But as soon as I turn this off, the song is going to get louder. So basically I want to have the utility on all the way up until the drop hits, and then I want it to turn off because that's going to make the song basically 1.5 dB louder. So we're just turning down the whole song until the drop, and then we're turning it back up to normal volume. Now another way to do this is to just straight turn up the volume on the drop of the chorus itself. And that's what I've done in Nicotine. So if we go into the automation of Pro L, we can look at this gain setting here where it says +2. Now the whole intro, the whole verse, everything up until the drop is at +2. And then when it gets to the drop, if you look, all of a sudden it's at +4. This just basically makes it so the drop slaps. Now, if you go too drastic with this, more than 2 dB, your song starts to get too quiet for the verses and the pre-choruses, and you actually end up messing with the dynamics so much that it could piss people off because they end up turning the verses or pre-choruses up on their radio or their stereo or their headphones or whatever it is, and then all of a sudden the drop is so loud and it's overwhelming. So you have to use this tastefully, but when you get it just right in that maybe 1.5, sometimes 2 decibel range, it makes a world of difference. I'll play the drop one more time and you can watch that automation.
One more thing, stay off the weed and you'll finally know what it's like to be free. Stay off of that alcohol and that nicotine. You'll get that body like a magazine. Just one more thing.
Also, side note, this song has like 2 million plays, and if I scroll down, it literally is 20 tracks. It's actually less because there's a couple references up top. So it's more like 18 tracks. The reason I say this is to let you know that a lot of times the best production is using less elements and trying to make each one of them the best quality it can be. But that's a little bonus tip. All right, my 5th and final tip is to experiment. Now, this may sound really simple and kind of obvious, but let me tell you a story about why this tip is so important, at least for me personally. There's a super simple MIDI trick, and I didn't know it for probably 5 or 6 years in Ableton, and it saved me a ton of time since I learned it. And that trick is the legato button. So I was in this session a while back where I was the main producer. I was supposed to be the guy who knew it all. At the time, I was used to drawing in MIDI notes like this. Let me make a new MIDI clip. This is why hotkeys are so great. So I would draw notes like this. I would click and drag, click and drag, click and drag. Or I would just draw in my notes like this, and then I would highlight them, hold shift and use the arrow keys to expand them. And my client said, why don't you just press legato? I said, legato? He said, legato. Just click the legato button. And so I had my notes short like this drawn in, and I highlighted them and I pressed the legato button, and it expanded all the notes to the next note. This is especially helpful if you play something in like. You can highlight those notes, click legato, and it'll stretch them all out for you. I felt so stupid because I was the one who was supposed to know it all, and he pointed something out that I didn't know. It was so simple, and the button was staring me right in the face. And sometimes it's the little things that make a big difference. That's why it's so important to experiment. I have my 20% of Ableton knowledge that I use to get 80% of the results. And the results are good, as you saw earlier. But sometimes you can get stuck using the same tools so much and you forget to experiment and you actually start slowing down or completely stopping your growth. If you feel like you've mastered the tools that you have now, try adding another tool into the mix. Every now and then, I'll set aside some time to explore plugins that I've never tried before. Even just the stock plugins in Ableton have a lot to offer. In fact, let's try that right now. One thing you could do is use this swap instrument tool and explore what different instruments sound like. Or you can go into audio effects up here to the left and try some stuff that you've never tried. Like, what is DTMF? Pretty weird. You may spend a few minutes just sorting through kind of junk sounds, but when you land on something good, there's a certain sense of accomplishment that comes along with discovery. This is such a good tool for growing and expanding your sound as a producer. So make some time to experiment. This is also really helpful if you find yourself getting stale and bored as a producer. There's always more tools and tricks to learn, and there are certain things that you'll discover through experimenting that you'd never find any other way. There are certain stock Ableton plugins that tons of producers overlook that no one is ever gonna teach you about on YouTube, and you'll have to discover them for yourself. Seriously, you never know when you're gonna discover something that becomes like a key element for your signature sound as a producer. So all that to be said, experiment. Okay, so those are some of my tips. And if you enjoyed this video and you want to learn more tips, I actually have a paid course that I spent over 1.5 years developing that takes you step by step from being a total beginner all the way to advanced and even professional. It's for producers, songwriters, artists, basically anybody who makes music. I have a 40-minute free training from the course, so that way you can watch it and kind of get a taste of what the course is like and see if it's something that you'd even be interested in. I'll link that in the description, and I'm also going to link my active music projects. I talk a lot of talk, but it's cool to hear my results and see some of the numbers that may inspire you. I have to say this though, and this might be the most important part of the video. You can watch videos all day about Ableton and production, but where you're really gonna see the growth is when you open up the DAW and you start creating. I went from producing crappy demos in my bedroom to touring the world after I started working on music every single night. So after you watch the next video or you check out the course or whatever it is you want to do, give yourself some time to play around with these tools. See how they can actually apply to your workflow, because otherwise you'll be like a personal trainer who knows all the right exercises but isn't in good shape. Or a chef who knows every recipe but hasn't actually made any food. Thanks so much for spending some time with me today. And as usual, I'll end with my motto for this channel. Stop making excuses and start making music. Cheers.